excited to see everybody here today. As I look at my window, I see quite a bit of snow. So, we've always had this meeting live in person at the Pequest Trout Hatchery. Since the pandemic, we've gone virtual, and I think maybe on a day like today, looks like we're certainly going to get more participation. We're up to 165 folks, so I think that's a positive thing. As we get started, I'm going to introduce our Assistant Commissioner, Dave Golden. He's going to give some introductory remarks in the presentation. It's all yours, Dave.
Yeah, thanks, Sean, and thanks everyone for joining us today. We really appreciate you carving some time out of your Saturday morning. What I'd like to do is give really a broad overview of some things that are going on within the Division of Fish and Wildlife, and I'm going to share my screen. Well, one exciting thing for New Jersey Fish and Wildlife this year is that we are celebrating our 130th anniversary. So back in 1892, the ancestry of New Jersey Fish and Wildlife began. We have a really deep and rich history in New Jersey. Lots of individuals have dedicated their lives to managing wildlife and providing outdoor access for outdoor recreation in New Jersey. Here's a vintage picture of one of the early fish stocking trucks. And I'll talk a little bit more about our history coming in some upcoming slides. But one thing that's significant that took place just this year, so we're only in the month of March, but there's already been some significant things going on within our agency this year. And some of you may have heard that we underwent a reorganization. I'm trying to get my slides to move here. So Fish and Wildlife is within the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. The commissioner of the DEP is Sean LaTourette. We were structured last year, and really since the department began, department was established back in 1970, we were under an office that was referred to as the Office of Natural and Historic Resources. Under that office were a number of divisions, and you can see them listed there. Some you're probably very familiar with. Well, early this year in January, this office was reorganized. So some of the divisions like Green Acres and Historic Preservation, they were moved into their own AC unit. And other divisions like Park Police, Parks and Forestry, and Forest Fire, they were also moved into a separate assistant commissioner's unit. And then Fish and Wildlife, we were moved into our own. So we moved out of an office of 6 divisions, and we became really our own branch of this DEP tree. So the new structure looks like this. I'm just going to pause for a second and ask the organizer if he could pick up that open mic and mute it. Yeah, thank you. So we became our own branch of the DEP tree, and I assumed the role of assistant commissioner. So I now report directly to the commissioner of the Department of Environmental Protection. So with that, we sort of lost our division status, and because we were elevated into this direct branch to the commissioner. So a look back over our agency's history. Again, I said 130-year anniversary, established in 1892 when the first game protector was hired. So the first salaried person in the state to work on fish and wildlife issues. So that was 1892. In 1945, by statute, the Division of Fish and Game was established. This is also the date at which our Fish and Game Council was established. In 1970, we underwent a name change, and we became the Division of Fish, Game, and Shell Fisheries. In 79, another name change. They changed it to Division of Fish, Game, and Wildlife, and you can see our logo there off to the right. That logo changed with time, one you may be familiar with, although the name stayed the same until 1999, when our name was changed to the Division of Fish and Wildlife, so something we've all become familiar with. You can see the logo on the right. That logo remained for about 20 years, and then a subtle change, if you look at the grass around the deer's head, that disappeared. So that's the logo that we are all familiar with now. And now here we are in 2022 under a reorganization. We lost the word division from our name, and now we are New Jersey Fish and Wildlife, and a slight change in our logo to reflect that. So a long history, and like I said, a deep and rich history. So a look back over time at our employees, which is really the powerhouse of this agency. And you can see over the past several years, we've experienced a steady growth in employee numbers, which is great. It's great for us. It's great for you in terms of us being able to carry out this great work. And when we look ahead to next fiscal year, we're budgeted for even more growth. So we could go up to 255 employees. Doubtful we'll ever reach that number just because we'll certainly have some retirements over the next year, but things are looking good from an employee standpoint in the coming year. You may be familiar with the fact that in November, we launched a wildlife habitat supporter program. This was a program that was targeted towards non-licensed buying members of the public. So it was launched in November of this year, and we've been collecting donations through this program. You may have seen on our Facebook page or some of our social media advertisements about this, how to donate. And that was all part of a very intentional and deliberate multimedia marketing campaign. One of the things right now we're very excited about is a revision to our website. So our current website has been in place for 20 plus years. It does have some limitations, as I'm sure each of you may have experienced as you navigate through the website. Certainly, if you try to access it on your cellular phone or mobile device, you can really see some of the limitations. You may have noticed that in the past several months, there's been some subtle changes to the website. We have a new webmaster. His name is Doug Rizzio. He's doing a great job keeping the webpage up to date and working within the constraints of the existing framework. However, we're moving to a much revised website with a huge revision, and we've contracted out a firm to do this work for us. We're looking forward to a launch this July of a website that is very new and very clean. So here's an example of what the homepage might look like. Getting a lot of background noise there, guys. Yeah, thanks. Here's an example of what the web page might look like. The home page, as you enter the site, you'll come to a very clean page, and the idea is to get you to the information you want to get to as clearly and as quickly as possible. When you click on the fishing page, it's set up so that it'll be very clear where to go depending on what type of information you're looking for. You could go the freshwater route, or you could go the saltwater route. If you go to saltwater, you'll have choices: recreational, commercial, just to kind of really clearly get you to the information you're looking for. If you went to the freshwater route, one of the things that we are focusing on is trying to get new anglers started. And so we're paying a lot of attention to how to get people started, giving them ideas about where to start, when to go, things like that. Really trying to direct the user to an experience that's satisfying and not frustrating. So really looking forward to that. Again, target date is July of this year, and you'll certainly hear more about that as we get closer, but something that our staff has really been involved in and working really hard. And in addition to this, which is a huge thing for our staff, we've still been able to maintain all of our other initiatives, including the one that you're here to hear about today, which is trout stocking and the trout program overall. So with that, again, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand it back over to Sean. Thanks very much.
Thanks a lot, Dave. That was real informative, and I'm sure our anglers appreciate you taking the time out of your Saturday morning to be here with us. Definitely.
Absolutely.
I think we do have time. If there's any anglers that have a question or two for our assistant commissioner, now would be a great time.
Yes, I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I can hear you.
Okay. Okay. It's been recently brought to my attention that there are plans to change the Delaware Water Gap National Recreation Area into a national park. And then there is concern that should this go through, will there continue to be both stocking of pheasants and stocking of trout in that area? And then the follow-up question is, do you know if there will be plans to still allow hunting within the new national park?
Well, there have been discussions about that. It's sort of a grassroots movement to take the recreational area and have it be considered, at least in part, not the entire thing, but in part, as a national park. I would hesitate to say that there are plans for that, but I think there's certainly been some discussions on it. And again, it's been grassroots. I personally don't think that the idea is going to gain a ton of traction or support. And the version that I've heard has been that there be a small area that would be designated a national park, and then the remainder, the much larger percentage, would be, I'm not going to get the terminology right, but a preserve, a national preserve of sorts, where hunting would be allowed. So in the discussions that are happening, it seems that only a small percentage of the overall property is being considered for a national park. And I think it's so early in the stage of even discussions that I wouldn't get too concerned yet about any loss of hunting or fishing privileges in that area.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I have a quick question, and I apologize for not getting in earlier because I had some technical difficulties. The question that I have, and again, it kind of relates to the gentleman's question just before me, and basically what that is your website indicated that the roadway through Kenlockwood Gorge is going to be permanently closed. At least that was stated on the website the last time I checked. And with respect to that, my question is, with the oncoming trout season, how's the state planned, therefore, to stock, knowing that that road, for the most part, is a real hazard?
Yeah, thank you, sir. I can take that question. So yeah, in recent years, the road going through the Kenlockwood Gorge has been taking a beating due to surface water runoff and high flooding conditions. There is a great cost, both environmentally and financially, to the division to keep that road open at this point. So we're acknowledging that it has not been maintained for vehicular traffic. As you know, there's parking access, that the primary parking from the lower end coming in from the south, and there's a little bit of access from the north. We are going to do our best to continue to stock that section. We're definitely going to stock it. It's getting its full allotment of fish, and we're going to take some smaller vehicles and get as far as we can in to stock the fish proportionately throughout that area. Now that it's definitely an issue that there's anglers on both sides of the fence here. Many folks like the idea of being able to drive through and park, whereas I've talked to many folks who really feel as if vehicular traffic, through that entire stretch, takes away from the experience of being out in nature and fishing in a fairly remote location. So yeah, at this point in time, as mentioned on the website, the road will continue to be closed.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Hello, this is John Kozo, Richmond Valley Trout Unlimited.
Hi, John.
Hi, thanks for having us today. My question is, what the Bureau's position is on stocking over wild trout populations or native trout populations, and what kind of consideration is taken, or if we're unaware of those situations, if we make you aware, what actions would be taken to either prevent stocking or reduce stocking, stuff of that nature.
Okay, Sir, I really, maybe I didn't make it clear earlier on, so I do apologize for that. Right now, our assistant commissioner is going to take just some big picture questions, if you have any. There'll be plenty of time for presentation specific questions. And then at the very end of the meeting, we're going to open it up to a variety of questions. So if anybody has any division-wide kind of non-fishery questions, now is that time, and we have time for one more of those type of magnitude questions. But we will get back to your question later, sir. Okay, sounds like we'll be moving along. Thank you, Assistant Commissioner Golden. We really appreciate everything you do for us.
Thank you.
Moving along, can everyone see my screen, my presentation?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. So I'm real excited about the agenda that we have here for you today. Once again, I'm Sean Kraus, Bureau Chief of Freshwater Fisheries, and I'm going to give you some fisheries updates. Before I do that, give me one moment. So I'd like to present the meeting agenda for us. You've seen this on the website possibly, but I'm going to give you an idea of how this meeting is intended to go. So I'm going to continue with some freshwater fisheries updates. After that, there'll be a brief question and answer period related to the slides that I present. After that, we're going to go over the hatchery production from our hatchery superintendent, Ed Connolly. Maria Berezin is going to present our 2022 trout stocking plan and allocations. And there'll be a brief question and answer period after each of these. She'll be followed by Justin Rosema, giving a presentation called Assessing the Effect of Cormorant Predation on Small Trout Stock Ponds in Northeastern New Jersey. That'll be followed by a brief public and answer question, and then we will open it up to miscellaneous questions. So please keep those questions pertinent to whatever the previous presentation is. A little bit of housekeeping here. Please, I'd like to remind you to keep your microphones muted. And if you're not currently asking a question, it would be helpful to keep your camera off. We will have the ability to check and monitor the chat. So if any of you have questions, feel free to put those questions in the chat, or resume by turning your microphone on during the appropriate times, and we'll get to some of your questions that way. And most importantly, please hold those miscellaneous questions until the very end. That would be appreciated. So as Assistant Commissioner Golden mentioned, this is we have a lot to celebrate. This is our 130th year anniversary. And for those of you that read the Freshwater Fishing Digest this year, you also see that our Hackettstown Fish Hatchery is celebrating our 110th anniversary. There's also an article in the digest indicating, how we've done and how we fared through the pandemic. And as that article indicates, and I can assure you that our stocking programs are stronger than ever. We've maintained meeting all of our quotas over the last 2 years of the pandemic, and the future of freshwater fishing in New Jersey is certainly bright. And also want to highlight, as of this year, this is the PQuest Trout Hatchery's 39th year. So next year will be our 40th. So that's a big one right there. And I also want to acknowledge that within the Bureau of Freshwater Fisheries, we have the 2 hatcheries as mentioned, and we also have a research and management unit. And that's where our biologists and our field technicians work to gather fisheries data, to educate the public, to recommend regulation changes, and all the above. So if you see this slide here, this is something I'm very excited about. This past year, we were able to hire 2 new biologists to backfill a couple positions. As you can see, in the Northeast, we have Justin Rosema. And just south of that, we have Maria Berezin Dowling. One of the structures that we utilize in order to better manage our freshwater fisheries across the state is each regional fishery, each fisheries biologist has a region. So each person is in charge and responsible for managing the fisheries within the watersheds that you see to your right. Some folks think it may be by county. That's not the case. We manage everything on a watershed basis. And in addition to having a watershed regional responsibility, each biologist, we'll say, has a specialty or particular job duties that are unique, and it enables us to specialize. So reading down the list on the left, you'll see that Maria Brezen-Dowling, she's in that light tan color in the north central portion of New Jersey. She's going to be overseeing the Wallkill, the Upper Passaic, the Rawway, and Elizabeth watersheds, and she is our new trout stocking coordinator, and I look forward to hearing from her later in this meeting. Eric Bohm, you'll see in the southeast, he's a senior fisheries biologist with us, and he handles the Atlantic coastal region. And right now he's focusing on our anadromous fisheries, fish passage, dam removals, fish ladders, and things of that nature, along with the general warm water fisheries management that he conducts through his region. Scott Collenberg is also a senior fisheries biologist, and he has taken over the Raritan watershed, a region that I managed for the last 15 years or so. Scott has now taken on responsibilities of working as our native fish conservationist. He does a lot of great work with water quality, and many of you have probably heard him present on that before. He's also taken over our database and running our statistical analysis. Justin Rozema, another new hire, he's an assistant biologist, and he's taking over, he's in the light blue in the upper right-hand corner. He's in charge of the Lower Passaic, the Pequannock, the Hackensack watersheds, and he's real excited to get going, taking over our cool water management program. And what I mean by that is he'll be managing the cool water fish species such as muskie, northern pike, walleye, and hybrid striped bass. Real excited to have him on board. He's been a seasonal with us for several years, so he knows the drill. Principal biologist Ross Schramko, he is in the upper Delaware. You'll see in the northwest corner of the state, the dark green. He has been our trout stocking, our trout stocking coordinator for a number of years. He's done a fantastic job with that, and he's handing those responsibilities over to Maria. That'll enable him to focus more on general fisheries management within his region, also taking over the wild trout program. Going to be doing some more work with our lake salmonids, including more close monitoring and management of our landlocked salmon, which has really gained a lot of steam over the last several years. And he does most of our GIS within the Bureau. And finally, our principal biologist, Chris Smith, he's been with the division for over 20 years. He has the lower Delaware River drainage, as you see in the light blue.
I can't get signed in. I got the meeting on the phone.
If I could remind everyone to please mute themselves, that would be great. Chris is in charge of our warm water management across the state. He takes interest in largemouth bass management in particular. He's also our invasive species coordinator and now our federal aid coordinator. So just to recap, I'm really excited about the team we have here together, and your fisheries are definitely in good hands for years to come. And I also wanted to mention, on this call right now, we have our hatchery superintendents and supervisors. We look forward to the relationship that our biologists are going to be having with our hatchery staff to continue to make fisheries in New Jersey top notch. I just wanted to remind everybody, we just recently had the Freshwater Fisheries Forum back on February 26th. This meeting will follow a real similar format. In that meeting, we discussed, we had several really great presentations. We pointed out that Hackensack Hatchery successfully raised and stocked 3.2 million freshwater fish last year, ranging 13 different species. We had presentations on our bass tournament results over the last 5 years and our skillful angler program. And I'm mentioning this now because we have this information for those of you that missed the meeting. It's up on our website. If you go under Freshwater Fisheries Forums, you'll find that. And the meeting was recorded, and that meeting recording will be posted there shortly. But as for now, we do have the PowerPoint presentations for anybody that's interested. One other thing, great thing just to mention here is that this is a trout meeting, and here we have our new state record, caught in September of 21 by Joe Sikowski. It's a beautiful fish. This program is really taking off, and we are really excited about it, and can't wait to continue to grow the program. Larger and larger fish, are caught consistently, as indicated by these back-to-back state records. So we look forward of what that program has to come. And that'll conclude my brief overview of what's going on within the Bureau right now. I'll open it up to a few questions if anybody has any on the information I just got done presenting. Okay.
By any chance, I just wanted to know, are they all gonna still be stocking the trout rivers and lakes, Zeus, like as far as in April?
Oh,
or?
yeah, with the Zeus, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's certainly the focus of this meeting, and we're about to get there. We're real
Okay,
excited.
because I remember last year with the pandemic, and I think it was also the previous year to that, Zeus, that they didn't stock them the same way as they usually did.
Yeah, you're right. Like when the pandemic was going on, I didn't see no Zeus in there.
Yeah, so during the pandemic, we invoked an accelerated stocking schedule. There were many uncertainties with the pandemic. We weren't sure if we were going to have staff, getting sick. We weren't sure how well we would be able to keep operations functioning over the duration. So, we invoked a modified regulations and accelerated stocking schedule. We are proud to announce that we are returning to normal this year.
All right.
But I don't want to steal anybody's thunder because
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's just one
No,
last question I have. It's about cheesequake. I know that you guys used to stock that little portion of that pond they had, and I think it was because of the salinity. Something happened with that. That's like a question that I have that could be answered, I guess, whenever later.
Sure. No, I can certainly answer that question for you. Yeah, so Hooks Creek Lake within Cheesequake State Park, ever since Hurricane Sandy, there have been some issues with there was saltwater inundation. We believe there's lasting impacts as salinity greatly fluctuates. We've had numerous fish kills there in recent years. So as an agency, we decided really at this point in time, it's not worth continued stocking in that water body because of the frequency of the fish kills. We're going to be working closely with Parks and Forestry staff to better identify the limiting factors and to try to rectify them if possible. But until further notice, we are putting a complete halt to all freshwater fish stocking in Hooks Creek Lake. So you are correct with that. We don't have any solutions at this time.
Thank you. That's all.
You're welcome. Moving along here, I'd like to pass the microphone over to our superintendent of the Pequest Trout Hatchery, Ed Conley.
I'm Ed Conley, Pequest Trout Hatchery Superintendent, and I'm going to go over some production and also some maintenance projects that take place at the hatchery. Over the last year here, we had several large projects. The domestic water line project started as soon as snow was off the ground last spring. This project replaced old PVC line that was in the ground for domestic drinking, and basically we had a lot of issues over the last 5 years of leaks and everything else. So it was presented that we needed to replace the whole line, and it took place and it went over several months, and the overall project cost $422,869. It was quite a large project, and as Sean said earlier, the hatchery is almost 40 years old now, so some things need to be upgraded. And another project that took place at the hatchery last year, the Pequest Administrative Building Roof Project. There were several sections of roof that were leaking, and you know, some of the blame was to the parapet walls, and you know, because they're kind of grooved and allows water to run underneath the roof, so they were also capped at this time. And also there's a skylight replaced. I know if you ever been to the main building here, there's a skylight in the lobby there. That was removed, which is okay because shining down at that desk, we don't need any additional lights or lighting. We do have brand new LED lighting there. That project cost about just under $275,000. Another project that took place is roof repairs to the other buildings down below. We have a maintenance building, a break room, you know, we have a building that houses our stocking trucks, and all had some leaking issues, and we were able to get them taken care of under CBT funding as well. That cost just under $20,000. One of our lifelines at the hatchery, we have 7 production wells, and basically we had a 200 gallon per minute pumping decrease on our well number 3, and this is usually a typical sign of impending failure. It's quite a extensive project. You know, they come out, they pull everything out with a hoist truck, and then everything's replaced there, and that cost about just under $30,000. But well 3 is one of our wells that pretty much runs 365 days a year. It's needed to keep production with the other wells. It's one of the larger producers. Also, wells number 1 and 5 had some leaking packing issues. Usually you can adjust packings in the wells, but there's no more adjusted left into them. So basically the same thing, you know, the well heads have to be, you know, pulled up by hoist, and and also in the one here, we had an issue with some bearings, so bearings had to be repressed on that. You know, you could see it was very deteriorated there, and the cost of that was about $8,000. Moving on, during the year, we have several other maintenance projects going on. You know, the hatchery runs 365 days a year, and you know, 24/7. So there's always maintenance to do on this place. Up top here, you can see this is our waste treatment plant, and we're just doing some maintenance here on the left, on the upper, and also on the one shed off of the treatment plant. We replaced the roof there, and you can see down here, this is a well road, and basically the well road needs to be brush hogged back to maintain access. And on the right side on the bottom, you can see that's the sluice way of the water returning to the Pequest River there. And we have to maintain that, and that's brushed hogged annually. And also there's many other projects. We had to dig up an electrical line here because the lighting went out on the lower raceway. So a new section of electric had to be put in. Again, this place is 40 years old, and you know, maintenance is constant here. So jumping to fish production, last fall we took about we selected 1.5 million eggs from several 3-year-olds that will be used for the 2023 production seasons. And then I believe it was 776. My screen was being blocked there by a window. But those fish are, they hatched probably around October. And now once again, the cycle repeats. These 2023 production trout are ready to be moved out of the nursery into the raceways. They're getting quite large, and the tanks are pretty full now. So the fish outside our 2022 production are about ready to go out the door to you guys to catch. We just did some weights and lengths this past week, and we're almost at 11-inch average on them. Our goal is 10.5 inches, so we have met and exceeded our goals. And we're looking to have some more, nice fish go out to you guys. We perform sorting operations twice a year, and this helps us keep a uniform product. So during all this, we're doing disinfection procedures as well as we're raising the fish. As you can see on the left is Nick Healy, our crew supervisor. He's dipping eggs in iodine there. That's a disinfection process. And then we also disinfect our nets, our equipment, and everything else to try to keep this place disease-free. As the raceways are empty, we power wash them, and then we also disinfect them. We also keep up predatory deterrence. We try to keep the birds out at all costs. We don't want to introduce any disease in here. Back in 2014, we had the furunculosis outbreak, which we thought was brought in by a bird. So as you can see, we put up mylar ribbon to keep the overhead clear of birds, and we just put it up because the birds start coming usually about the end of March here. They start migrating back north. As you can see to the right here in this picture, there's a scary man, which also kind of deters birds. And we have a propane cannon down here, which makes loud noises to deter them. And then we have bird bangers that we shoot to deter them also. So as we get into the end of March, beginning of April, staff usually have to harass birds constantly. So last year we raised 589,525 production size fish for the spring stocking. And basically 509,000 were stocked between March 16th and April 10th. And then another 80,000 was stocked between May 18th and May 21st. Overall, there was 597,000 stocked at about 305,000 pounds. So, and along with that went some plus size brood stock. There's some 2-year-old brood stock averaging about 15.4 inches. And then we had some 3-year-old brood stock averaging about 20.2 inches. So then jumping into the fall, last fall, we produced 20,360 2-year-old rainbow trout for the fall program, averaging about 14.3 inches. Along with that, we stocked about 885 3-year-old plus size brood stock, and they averaged about 19.4 inches. Total fish for the fall was a little over 21,000 at a little over 32,000 pounds. So jumping into winter's 2021 winter trout stocking, we stocked about just under 5,000 rainbow trout and they're also 2-year-olds, and they went out at a 14.7-inch average, and we're just under 7,500 pounds. So, and other things that go on in the hatchery here, you can see this is Brad Duckworth. He's a senior wildlife worker here at the hatchery. He's tagging the hook and winter fish, and the hook and winter program you can find on page 43 of the Freshwater Digest, or at NewJerseyFishingWildlife.com under fishing, and then just hit the hook and winter tab. Basically, this program, we jaw tag just about 1,000 fish, and if you catch these fish and you send in your tag number, we'll present you with a patch and a certificate. And again, just look in the digest, or you can go to the thing. And please do not send in the tag if you're sending in. Basically, the tags will break through the envelope and fall out anyways. Just provide the tag number. Last year we had 107 tag returns. On an average year, we're a little bit higher than that. We're like 150, 160s. But you know, due to the unnormal nature of the last couple of years, I'm not sure if everybody's, you know, aware of the program and that. So please make yourself aware, and if you catch these fish, put in for a patch and a certificate. Jumping into 2022 projections, what's called preseason, we're looking at 252,000 trout, and you know, we're going back to a 10-week season. There'll be 3 weeks of preseason, and then weeks 1 through 7 in season, and the weeks 1 through 7 will be about 318,000 trout, and we're right around our normal 570,000 brood stock, or not brood stock, I'm sorry, production fish, excuse me. The stocking trucks will roll on March 21st, and they'll be out the door, and they'll be coming to the water near you. Say opening day is April 9th, and basically maybe you could be lucky like this little guy here and catch one. So, and please do not forget to go out and buy your 2022 fishing license and trout stamp. Fishing licenses and trout stamps can be purchased online at njfishingwildlife.com or at your local agents. And that's the end of my presentation. I don't know if anybody has a quick question for me, or you want to hold questions at the end. Maria will be coming up with a stocking plan for this year.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I have a question about the trout stocking program in the fall, and it would pertain to Lake Pahakon in Tuckerton, New Jersey. It wasn't stocked in the fall of this prior fall season, but yet it was stocked prior to that the years before. My question, two-part question is, one, why wasn't it stocked? And second question, well, actually, I'm asking if it could possibly be stocked this fall.
Okay, I'll hand that back over to a biologist. They're in charge of stocking, creating water bodies for stocking.
Okay.
Hey, I can answer that question briefly. I think what happened is Pahakon Lake in Ocean County, it gets stocked every spring. It's part of our spring trout stocking program for a long time. But I think you're confusing Pahakon Creek in Warren County, which receives...
No, Pahakon Lake.
What's that?
No, I'm particularly talking about Pahakon Lake in Tuckerton.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, it was never part of the fall trout stocking program to my knowledge. That's why it's not stocked in the fall.
Yeah, but it was stocked 2 years in a row prior to this past fall. So I was wondering why it was taken off that list.
It's stocked every spring. Yeah, it gets a spring.
No,
trout.
no, you're not hearing me. It was stocked prior, it was prior to this fall, right? It was stocked twice in the fall, once in 2020 and 2019. It were stocked. The hatchery truck was there. I lived that area and I seen them stocked it and I fished it and we caught nice trout throughout the winter. And it wasn't stocked this fall. My question is why?
Mhm. Well, I don't have an answer for that right now, but I'm perfectly fine keeping it on the spring trout stocking list. I can look into that.
No, not
more.
spring. It's the fall stocking. My question is. Okay.
Yeah.
One other thing. Listen, real quick. And here's the issue I have. The Pahakon Lake was stocked. All right. And for me to fish it, I only live 10 minutes away, so it's a convenience. And a lot of other people have go fish it in the fall for the trout. The thing is, I look at like I got to drive now an hour and some minutes away, like Hamilton Lake is new for me. But I see that the access to Hamilton Lake is basically very limited. 90% of the lake, 85 to 90% of the lake is privately owned and there's no trespassing. So you're very limited to accessing like a lake like that for trout stock from the bank, right? But yeah, Pahakon Lake is very open. It's open almost all state park all the way around for access of fishing. And yet it's not stocked in the fall. It was passed up. Could you give that some consideration this fall? And there is quite a few people that fish it, and you know you do get it and enjoy it. Besides myself, I'm actually speaking for a good handful of people who asked me to come on this program and speak up for them for the fall stocking. So if you can, just please make note of that and see if there's something you can do for that.
Hey, sir, this is
Yes.
Chris Smith. I'm one of the other fisheries biologists that covers South Jersey.
Okay.
I did look up the that trout stocking for last fall, and it was stocked last year in October.
No, well, yeah, I was there on the day they said it was stocked, and a few of my friends, and no truck had pulled up, sir. No truck.
Okay.
I was there for 5 hours, and no truck pulled up.
The lake was never stocked.
It was not stocked. I would not lie to you. I would not.
Well, we'll have to look into that a little bit more.
Yes,
it is part of the
I
program.
promise you, sir, that it wasn't stocked. I
Okay,
swear.
excuse me,
Back
if
up by.
I could jump in right now. I'm going to have staff look into this. We'll
Okay.
try to sort this out by the end of the meeting, if we could move along.
Yeah, no problem.
Yep, I'll put staff on this and we'll get an answer for you. We'd like to move along to the next presentation. This is Maria Berezin Dowling.
I would like to ask one question, please.
Sir, I'm going to ask you to hold. I'm going to ask you to hold all questions right now.
It
There'll be
regards the
adequate time
trout
at the end of the
raising.
meeting.
It regards the last presentation.
Okay, go ahead, give it a shot.
Are there any plans to produce brook or brown trout in the future? Thank you very much.
Yes, that's the question I was looking to answer. I see a lot of questions in the chat regarding that. So yeah, I'll answer that one right here since that's a big one. Unfortunately, the answer that we're going to give is the same one you've heard in recent years. After furunculosis, we had major issues, and it's our intention to cover the raceways to try to prevent the avian predators from coming in and spreading the bacteria. So we're in the process of trying to cover the raceways. One complication with that is the notion of integrating solar panels. I can tell you that as recently as 2 weeks ago, we had a meeting with some contractors to discuss potential plans to do that. During a pandemic, some of that conversation was put to a little bit of a stop, but we've regained, we've resumed those conversations. So I can tell you that at this point in time, we're only raising rainbow trout. The notion of bringing back brown trout is going to have to wait until after the raceways are covered. And then we have to remember that it'll be another couple of years after they're covered by the time we bring in eggs from an outside source, reestablish our brood stock, and get that program up and running again. but I can assure you we're very, very interested in bringing brown trout back to our program. And it will happen at some point. We just really don't have an honest time frame for that for you. In regards to brook trout, there's a good chance we're not going to be bringing them back. Recent conservation efforts for wild brook trout has been something taken very seriously from Georgia to Maine. And if we were to bring back brook trout, it would be in a very limited capacity, very select locations, and we really don't have any plans to do that at this point in time. Moving on to the next presentation, and what I'm going to do is ask to hold all questions until the end. I think that'll facilitate things and move a little bit quicker. And once again, we are responding to questions in the chat right now, so that seems to be going very well. So Maria, I'm going to hand it off to you. And thanks a lot, Ed. You did a great job.
Okay, thank you, Sean. My name is Maria Berezin-Dowling, and I'm going to talk to you today about the 2022 Spring Trout Stocking Program and the changes to the program. Okay, sorry, my slide wouldn't advance. So this spring, we are stocking a total of 174 water bodies. 89 of those water bodies will be streams, as seen here. 85 of those water bodies will be lakes, as seen here. And as you can see, lakes are very popular among anglers on opening day. In addition to the hatchery staff, oh, actually, I'm getting ahead of myself here. So our hatchery, as Ed mentioned earlier, raises roughly 570,000 trout per spring season. So all of those trout will be stocked at our 174 water bodies throughout the state, in many cases multiple times. So it is a huge task. And as Ed mentioned previously, all of those trout are raised right here at our state trout hatchery. In addition to our hatchery staff, the trout stocking season is a coordinated effort that couldn't be done without the following groups. Those groups being the biologists who annually review the stocking locations before the allocation program is run and the number of trout are determined via the allocation program. The conservation officers who are on the ground enforcing the trout fishing regulations, the stocking crews who are going out to all those 174 water bodies throughout the state on many occasions, as I mentioned previously, multiple times. So it is a huge task to undertake. Then we have the Fish and Game Council, who is responsible for proposing and adopting the Fish Code, which is a legal document that specifies freshwater fishing regulations that anglers must follow. And then we have the public, and of course, fish are stocked for the public, and as such, their preference is taken into strong consideration. I'm now going to talk about the 2022 Spring Trout Stocking Plan. As Ed and Sean mentioned, we will be returning to what we're calling a normal season with some modifications. So we are referring to a normal season because we are returning to 7 weeks of in-season stocking with 3 weeks of pre-season stocking, and we are going to be running under normal regulations. Now I'm going to explain what I mean by normal regulations in a couple slides. So I mentioned that we're returning to normal, but why I'm mentioning that we're returning to normal is because, as many of you know, over the past 2 seasons for 2020 and 2021, we had to run under an accelerated stocking schedule. Now, under that accelerated stocking schedule, we had 4 weeks of preseason stocking and only 1 week of in-season stocking. As I mentioned, we are returning to 3 weeks of preseason with 7 weeks of in-season stocking. Now, the purpose of running those 4 weeks of preseason stocking and only 1 week of in-season stocking was to clear fish from the hatcheries as quickly as possible to reduce the loading days. On days where fish are being loaded onto the trucks, there are close interactions among staff and the public. Another reason is to clear raceways in case of a COVID-19 outbreak among the staff. So if there was a COVID-19 outbreak among staff, we wanted to make sure that those fish were out of the raceways to make room for next year's fish so that we didn't have a disruption to not only this year's schedule, but next year's schedule as well. So those raceways had to be cleared for those fish to be coming from the nursery into those outside raceways at the hatchery. Another reason, again, is simply to reduce staff interactions with the public during stocking because, as we know, during the pandemic, any interaction with another individual was a potential exposure to COVID-19. And in addition to the accelerated stocking schedule, as Ed and Sean mentioned previously, we ran a catch and release period prior to opening day starting on April 1st. Part of the reason for doing that was to spread out anglers on opening day and reduce crowds. We figured because people had the opportunity to fish prior to opening day, that may cause less crowds on opening day. And as you could see from that picture of the pond earlier in my presentation, ponds and lakes can get quite crowded on opening day. Another reason for that catch and release period was to reduce the number of anglers fishing out of state. So we were trying to allow anglers to have more in-state fishing opportunities prior to opening day so that they wouldn't be forced to travel during the pandemic. So now I'm going to go over what a normal versus accelerated versus our current 2022 scenario will look like. So you'll see here on this chart, I have separated by normal 2020 and 2021, which are our pandemic years, and then 2022. So the first thing on this chart that you'll see is the total number of trout does not change between these three scenarios. So whether we are running a normal schedule or our accelerated schedule from the past 2 years, or this schedule, we have that same baseline number of trout that are going out into these water bodies. If you go down to the next line, you'll notice that what we have is the number of preseason weeks and the number of trout going out in those preseason weeks. So during a normal schedule, we have 3 weeks of preseason stocking, and during those 3 weeks, we normally have roughly 184,000 trout going out. During our accelerated schedule, rather than having 3 weeks of preseason stocking, we had 4 weeks of preseason stocking, and we were putting out 500,000 fish during those 4 weeks. And as you can see, that is an incredible increase, more than twice what we would normally be putting out during the preseason. This year, we are going back to 3 weeks of preseason stocking. However, there is a slight increase in the number of fish going out during the preseason. This is again to help clear those raceways so that we can start bringing next year's fish out into the raceways and not have an issue for next year's trout stocking season should there be a COVID outbreak among staff. The next line you'll see is a preseason closure. Now, during a normal season, we do have preseason closures during the preseason stocking period. Those trout stocked waters are closed to trout fishing during that period. During 2020 and 2021, we did not have a preseason closure, but rather from April 1st through opening day, we had a catch and release period. We will be doing away with the catch and release period this year and going back to our preseason closures during the preseason stocking period. The next line you'll see is in-season stocking weeks and the number of trout going out in season. As you can see, during a normal schedule, we would have 7 weeks of in-season stocking and roughly 386,000 fish going out during that period. During our COVID year, we had 1 week of in-season stocking and only 70,000 fish going out during that time. This year, we are returning to 7 weeks of in-season stocking, and we do have about 70,000 fish less going out in season. However, anglers are not losing out on those fish. They simply went out earlier in the preseason to make way for those additional fish in the raceways at the hatchery. Another change is you can see that during a normal year, we have in-season closures on 14 different water bodies on the days that they are stocked. Last year, we only had 1 week of in-season stocking, so we did not have in-season closures on those or any other water bodies. We are returning to that program of having in-season closures on 14 water bodies on the days that they're stocked. You can find the list of those water bodies on our website or in the digest, and you can actually access the digest on the website. One thing that I think is a positive that I hope that people enjoy is that we'll be bringing back our bonus broodstocks pond program. This is a program in which we stock additional large fish in a subset of our water bodies so that there are additional larger fish available to anglers on opening days during those water bodies. During our COVID years, we did away with that program just because we didn't want to increase crowds at water bodies on opening days. We are going back to that program now this year because that's less of a concern for us. Unfortunately, one thing that we are not able to return to this year is our use of volunteers. So in the past, we had used a number of volunteers to help us stock different water bodies. During the pandemic, we unfortunately had to stop that program due to concerns for COVID-19. Unfortunately, this year we are not able to return to that program, but that is something that we're going to return to in the future. Now, why are we returning to normal? Well, we believe that this is the product that our constituents want. Anglers are returning to sporting events. They're able to go to the grocery store. They're able to go to school events unmasked. And we think that people would like to get back to fishing like normal. Another reason is simply that our messaging has been consistent through all platforms. We've been saying that these modifications are due to COVID-19. Now that our concerns for COVID-19 have lessened, our modifications should also lessen so that we are in line with the messaging that we've been putting out throughout the pandemic. Another reason is simply that society is trending towards normal. As I mentioned, people are going to sporting events and grocery stores, so we feel that people should be able to fish like normal. And we were simply very, very lucky not to have high trout mortalities with those increased densities. As I mentioned, we had 4 weeks of preseason stocking where we had 500,000 fish going out. Those high densities could lead to high mortality rates on stocking trucks. We were very lucky not to have that situation occur. So we just didn't want to even take that risk this year when we don't have to do so. So I mentioned kind of how we're going to run the season. Now I want to talk to you about the trout allocation methodology. So we do have a database, a program that determines the number of trout that each water body get or receive. So streams and rivers take different physical, biological, and social factors into consideration. The physical factors that the trout allocation methodology takes into consideration when determining the number of trout a water body will get for streams and rivers is the flow or size of the stream in cubic feet per second and the length of the stocking influence. For lakes and ponds, the physical factor is the surface area or size in acres. The biological factor for both streams and rivers and lakes and ponds are the same, and that is whether the water body can support trout for part of the year or all year, or whether it is a seasonal or year-round fishery. The social factors for streams and rivers are land ownership. Does the stream run through private or public property? Is there parking available? And are there interested anglers in the area? The social factors for lakes and ponds include population density of the municipalities adjacent to the water body, angler access, is there open shoreline, is there a boat launch, and are there other trout stocked opportunities nearby? Here's just kind of a screenshot of our allocation program. So all of those factors come together, we plug them into this program, and then this program gives us the exact number of fish that each water body should get, or the allocation of fish for each water body. So now I'm going to talk about some changes to the different water bodies for the 2022 spring trout stocking season. So our first change is to the West Branch Papicating Creek in Sussex County. 2 stocking points were dropped on this creek and 1 new point was added along the West Branch Papicating. New GIS data allowed us to see that those 2 stocking points that we were removing were actually on a tributary to the West Branch Papicating Creek. So this new data has allowed us to identify that issue, and we will now only be stocking the main stem of the stream. Despite the fact that we're dropping 2 points, we are still adding a point, so we're gaining stocked river mileage. So this will result in an additional 190 fish for the West Branch Papicating Creek. Our next change is to the Ho-Hocus Brook in Bergen County. We've added 2 new stocking locations to this water body because public parkland was identified along this stream. This will result in an additional 550 fish for the Ho-Hocus Brook in spring 2022. One other change is to Mill Pond. Mill Pond will not be stocked this spring due to increased sedimentation from storms. Siltation was already relatively high at this site and was severely impacted by strong summer, fall, and winter storms. So this water body is simply no longer suitable for trout stocking. However, the fish that were supposed to go into Mill Pond will be redistributed to local ponds, so there will be no loss of fish to that area. Another change is Franklin Pond Creek in Sussex County. Stocking along Franklin Pond Creek will be altered due to active roadway construction along Route 23 North. Stocking will continue at 4 locations just downstream of the stocking location, and there will be no change to the number of fish stocked on this water body. Another change that Sean mentioned earlier is the Ken Lockwood Gorge in Hunterdon County. As mentioned earlier, the access road has not been maintained after several damaging storm events. Vehicle access is now restricted to the 2 outer parking lots. However, anglers can still park at either end of the gorge and access the entire stretch on foot. And as Sean mentioned, we will be doing our best to stock the interior of the gorge so that anglers still have all that same fishing opportunities that they would normally have. There is no change to the number of trout being stocked on the gorge. And I want to now talk briefly about our bonus broodstock program, which I mentioned earlier is being reinstated this year. This is a program in which 30 to 50 additional large or broodstock fish get added to 10 different water bodies that we select per year. These water bodies will change each year, so if you don't see a water body on the list this year, that doesn't mean that it won't be in the program in future years. So this year, our bonus broodstock lakes will be Birch Grove Park Pond, down there in Atlantic County, Burnham Park Pond, Crystal Lake, Donards Lake, Franklin Lake, Lower Echo Park Pond, Mountain Farm Pond, Shaw's Mill Pond, Spooky Brook Park Pond, which I know people asked about previously, so it is being stocked and it is getting bonus broodstock as well, and Verona Park Pond. I finally want to mention that you can find the stocking information on our website, so you can find which days each water body is stocked with how many fish during each week of the in-season stocking period on our website at njfishandwildlife.com. You can also find fishing access location on our website by county. Here, again, this is njfishandwildlife.com. As you can see, we have water bodies listed by county, and then you have the water body name, the township where they're located, the location of the water body, and some driving directions on how to access that water body. You can find the same list in alphabetical order if that's easier for you. The county, township, and location are still listed with those same driving directions. This might just be an easier way for folks to look at this information. Finally, you can call our trout stocking hotline to find out the trout stocking schedule, which water bodies are being stocked which days, at 609-633-6765. You can also subscribe to our email list via our website or follow us on social media. In addition to that, all of our trout stocked water bodies have signs on them with QR codes. If you scan the QR code with your smartphone, it will download the entire in-season stocking schedule right to your cell phone. And with that, I don't know if we're taking questions now or if we're waiting till the end, but that ends my presentation. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Maria. You did a fantastic job there. Way to go. I think that you conveyed some very clear and important information to our anglers there, which I'm sure they appreciate. One thing I want to get ahead of here is I'm seeing a lot of activity in the chat about the notion of our catch and release preseason. We're completely aware, that there's mixed positions on the notion of the catch and release in the preseason. I just want to remind everybody that during the pandemic of the last 2 years, where we felt it was critical to stock, the majority of our fish as fast as we can during the preseason, we felt that was critical to do in order to, protect the safety of our employees, in order to protect the fish and make sure we get them out there for the public to enjoy. Under the worst case scenario, if drivers or hatchery employees, were to become ill and not be able to report to work, and if that were to happen on a large scale, we had very large concerns that we wouldn't be able to get those fish out to the public. And also, the production cycle at the Peak West Trout Hatchery runs like a fine-oiled machine, and everything is very important to happen on time. Any significant delays could put the next year's fish at risk. And what I mean by that is younger fish that are still in the nursery building, they're growing quickly and they need a place to go. So every spring, when we stock the production fish, as Craig, as Ed mentioned, 10.5 to 11 inches, those fish have got to get out of the raceways, and they have to get out of the raceways on time, so those nursery fish have a place to go. Under that accelerated stocking schedule, we made the decision to open up an early season catch and release time frame to allow anglers to kind of spread out. We all know that on opening day in many places it can be a circus-like atmosphere where anglers are fishing elbow to elbow, and we didn't feel as if it was in anyone's best interest to have this large anticipated build up to opening day. So one way around that was to have what we were calling like a soft opener, April 1st, allowing a catch and release season. And we heard a lot of positive feedback. Many anglers told us that, with high densities being stocked and that preseason catch and release, that a lot of people thought it was perfect. They thought it was great. We also took a lot of heat because there were probably just as many anglers on the other side of that argument that didn't understand why we did it. They didn't like the fact that we did it. They cited high hooking mortality, although I have to admit that was never substantiated. According to our field staff, we never saw it. We never saw photographs of it. This year, kind of coming out of the pandemic, we found the most important thing to be was to try to get back to normal. We wanted to reestablish, kind of bring our program back to the gold standard, and that has been a 3-week of preseason, a 7-week of in-season with what we were calling normal regulations and a normal opening day. So the reason why we're not doing catch and release is because we're not doing this big preseason dump of 500,000 trout. One thing that this certainly isn't the first time I'm making this statement. I've made it at Fishing Game Council meetings. I've made it at previous public meetings, is that here at Fish and Wildlife, we are incredibly interested in molding our program, in our trout stocking program specifically, into a product that our anglers want. Those fish are raised, for your enjoyment, and although the big focus now is let's just get back to normal and kind of recalibrate, reset everything. Moving forward, I have intentions of implementing some form of an angler survey. Many details to be worked out. Is it going to be the licensed buyers? Is it going to be the trout stamp buyers? And how would we implement this? Via the internet, via the telephone? Many details to be worked out, but the main idea here that I want everybody to walk away with is that we want your feedback. We want to provide a program for you that meets your needs. So with that said, continue to let us know how you feel. Let us know if the catch and release was the thing for you. Let us know if it wasn't. But you can anticipate at some point, I don't even have a time frame on it, but you can anticipate at some point in time, we'll be implementing some form of an angler survey to get to the heart of those questions. So with that said, let's move on to our final presentation of the morning. Justin Rosema, about to present some of his graduate school work that he worked side by side with Fish and Wildlife on. It's all yours, Justin.
Great, thank you, Sean. You guys can all see my screen and hear me correctly, right?
Yep, you're good to go.
Okay, great, thank you so much, Sean. So as Sean mentioned, my name is Justin Rosema. I am the regional biologist for the Lower Passaic River watershed. But before I became a full-time staff, I was a graduate student with Paul Smith College, where I conducted this study in conjunction with New Jersey Fish and Wildlife. Because this was a grad student project, I just want to say up front that the amount of effort and the amount of scope that this project encompassed was a little bit more limited than what New Jersey Fish and Wildlife maybe could have done if we included more full-time staff on this. But regardless, the study provides a lot of good information that's useful for both New Jersey Fish and Wildlife as an agency, as well as for the public. Let's see if I can advance my slide. There we go. So to begin, for those of you that don't know, double-crested cormorants are a migratory fish-eating bird species that's endemic to the entirety of North America, as you can see on the graph or on the illustration on the right there. They winter in the southern United States, and then they migrate north in the springtime to breed in the northern parts of the US and the southern parts of Canada. Throughout the 1950s to 1970s, looking at the graph on the left, double-crested cormorant populations were extremely low due to a variety of factors. Starting in the 1980s, a steady recovery of the species began, and the population has increased to a much elevated size in the present day. And today's population size is thought to be closer to historical populations in the 1800s. Now, cormorants and New Jersey anglers clash mostly during our spring trout stocking period, when our spring trout stocking often coincides with when cormorants are migrating north to their breeding sites. Cormorants are generally a steady source of complaints at a multitude of our urban stock ponds, as they're often seen catching and eating a lot of stock trout here. And generally, poor fishing is often attributed to cormorants eating these trout. And therefore, anglers believe that the increase in birds is starting to cause high detrimental impacts to our stocking program at these urban ponds. Now, this is where my graduate study kicked in. The purpose of my study was to determine how much cormorant predation actually affects the availability of trout on opening day at small trout stock ponds throughout New Jersey, or I should say actually in the northeast corner of the state. Prior to this study, how much cormorants eat trout has been unmeasured within New Jersey. However, New Jersey Fish and Wildlife has been counting cormorants at the affected water bodies since the mid-2000s. This study aimed to provide initial insight into trout consumption and more in-depth data on pond usage by cormorants within the state. And these are the 6 water bodies that I selected for my study. All these are small stock ponds that had a history of cormorant issues. And all these ponds were located within the northeastern part of the state, primarily because of my graduate work. And I was basically I was one of the major person that conducted the study with help from a few part-time employees that helped me out as well. So I kept all the ponds close to my home so that I was able to monitor them more often. And if this was a New Jersey Fish and Wildlife study, we would have liked to spread out these water bodies across the state, and we will be. I'll talk about that in just a little bit, though. Because of the accelerated stocking schedule, all of these selected ponds ended up needing to be stocked 4 weeks prior to the opening day. All of these ponds were sampled 3 times per week throughout this 4-week preseason stocking period, and every pond was visited for at least 2.5 hours per visit. During each of these 2.5 hour long visits, we counted the number of cormorants that were present to create an average amount of birds that were there. And any actively feeding and diving cormorants were constantly monitored for fish catches, and all trout catches were tallied. Because of COVID-19, as Maria mentioned, we had a catch and release season from April 1st to April 10th. This allowed us the opportunity to interview anglers on their fishing success during this preseason catch and release period. Anglers were interviewed and a number of trout caught, and the amount of time fished was obtained in order to create a catch per hour, which allowed us to assess how good or bad the fishing was. These are the 3 major calculations that my graduate study looked to calculate to help us better interpret our findings. The first on the far left here is bird days, which is defined as 1 day spent by one cormorant at a given water. And this calculation helped to provide insight into cormorant presence on days where we weren't visiting the ponds. In the middle here is my calculation for how I assessed how many trout were consumed each week. And then on the right, we have our angling success calculation, which allowed us to compare how the fishing was at each pond and compare it to cormorant usage. Now, before I can get into the findings of my study, I just wanted to reiterate some of the deviations that occurred during the course, some deviations in the trout stocking that occurred during the course of my study last year that happened because of our accelerated schedule. The unfortunate timing of my study did lead to us having to conduct the study during the accelerated program, whereas it would have been better to be able to look into a more normal period to get more accurate findings. However, just because of the way that my graduate track ended up happening, it was necessary to do it last year. To begin, all of a pond's trout allocation was stocked during the preseason versus the normal schedule, which during the normal schedule, the allocations generally spread out over 4 in-season stockings, plus the preseason stocking, in order for all the trout to be spread out and available to anglers. Because of a pond's trout allocation was all stocked during the preseason during a single stocking, this caused increased and elevated numbers of fish to be present during the preseason when compared to normal. Also, because of the accelerated stocking, as I mentioned before, ponds had to be stocked at the beginning of a 4-week preseason period. Normally, these ponds, as well as other cormorant impacted waters, normally are stocked during the last week just prior to opening day. This meant that all trout were exposed to cormorants for a longer period than what would be normal. Now to get into some of the findings of my study. First question that I've looked to answer was, how much did cormorants use trout stock ponds during the preseason? Now this graph here, each of the lines that's shown here is one of the 6 water bodies. Starting, and then the bottom axis over time is just time since they were stocked, and then towards opening day, moving towards opening day. Cormorants appeared to show a consistent trend across all of the ponds of a steady arrival and then a steady departure. Little to no cormorants were seen at all but one pond at week 1. And then starting in week 2, we saw a steady increase where it then peaked in week 3. And then finally, the last week before opening day, cormorant counts ended up decreasing to more lower numbers, similar to numbers that we saw during the second week. It's unknown that if this spike was a migrating flock of birds moving north, or if cormorant abundance was more tied to resource availability. Therefore, it's unknown if these are what these impacts are, and we would like to look into this a little bit more further. Second question that I looked to answer was how many fish were consumed by cormorants. It was estimated that 117 to 526 trout were consumed at each pond where they were present. As you can see on the right of this graph here, West Hudson did not have any cormorants, and therefore no trout were estimated to have been consumed there. This number of fish constituted between 8.5% to 29% of the population of trout that were stocked in the spring. But remember that these estimates are for a total exposure of 4 weeks. Normally, these fish would only be in the pond for a total of 1 week. So therefore, they were exposed for a lot longer time. Despite all of this, greater than 70% of all trout stocked survived this 4-week long period until they were available for anglers to harvest on opening day. Next, I looked into what factors could have possibly affected cormorant success at these locations and found that density was the major contributing factor towards how many trout were consumed. And it makes sense. I think there's more fish in a smaller place. And it's almost like the popular phrase like shooting fish in a barrel. It works both ways for both anglers and for cormorants, as cormorants had a much higher success rate when trout were stocked at a higher density. But also remember that because of the accelerated stocking schedule, the number of trout was much more elevated than what would normally occur. So therefore, these findings could be slightly biased because of that. Normal densities would range between 43 to 125 trout per acre, as you can see in the left side of that graph, whereas densities that occurred during this study were between 97 and 300. Now, for the big elephant in the room, how do cormorants actually impact fishing success? And unfortunately, I have to say that I still don't have the ability to provide a definite answer on this. The amount of data that I was able to collect as part of this study ended up not being enough to draw a definite conclusion. Despite you can see that there was a lower catch rate per hour at places with cormorants versus the one pond that did not have cormorants. Statistical analyses were unable to determine if this decrease was actually related to cormorant impacts. Other variables such as the time of day and weather ended up playing too much of a role for me to be able to draw an exact conclusion as to whether or not this decrease was actually caused by cormorant presence. Despite this study not being able to provide any the significant evidence towards it, New Jersey Fish and Wildlife still believes that cormorants do have an effect on angler success and enjoyment, and we're attempting to find solutions to improve angler satisfaction and mitigate cormorant impacts. Now, here are some of the considerations that are being taken into account this year. During a literature review for this study, it was found that any fish greater than 16 inches was unable to be consumed by cormorants. Almost all of our fish that are in our bonus broodstock program are this size or larger. Since cormorants aren't able to catch and eat bonus broodstock sized fish, this blood program is likely to be minimally impacted by cormorants. Next, stocking closer to opening day will help to reduce the amount of fish consumed by cormorants. This helps to affirm New Jersey Fish and Wildlife's practice of stocking close to opening day. Since cormorant impacted water bodies generally been stocked later than what would normally happen, or during what happened during the accelerated schedule, these water bodies will now be moved back to 1 week prior to opening day. which will not only reduce the amount of time that trout are in the pond and therefore can be eaten by cormorants, but also the decrease in cormorant counts that occurred during that last week prior to opening day means that overall less cormorant activity is likely to occur. Lastly, returning to in-season stockings will allow the majority of a pond's trout allocation to be stocked during the open fishing season, which allows for the trout population to be immediately available for anglers and consistently refreshed over time. This will also reduce the number of trout that are stocked preseason, which will decrease the amount of fish that are lost to cormorants prior to opening day. Now, to give you a little bit more of some exact numbers of what we estimate these losses to be this year, returning to this more normal schedule, we'll see a reduction from 8.5% to 29% of trout down to only about 1.5% to 10% during the 2022 season. When we return to a fully normal schedule, this study predicts that we'll see a further reduction in cormorant predation to 0 to 6.3%. And then also remember that these estimates from this study are based on the 4-week time frame, meaning that cormorants could possibly only eat these percentages in a total of 4 weeks. Moving these ponds back to 1 week within opening day will help to further reduce these losses from what is estimated. So what's being done this year? We're hoping that we'll be able to continue monitoring cormorants and to help continue to build off of the study. We're hoping that we'll be able to have 10 different water bodies that are going to be monitored starting and during the preseason stocking period, but also moving into the open fishing season for an additional 4 weeks for a total of 7 weeks of monitoring. And this will help us to get a better understanding of cormorant usage, not only during preseason, but also during the open fishing season as well. Now, I know that was a lot of information, so thank you guys for sticking in and listening. I wanted to provide just a couple summary points, just for like the main points that I wanted to hammer home. So the first is that New Jersey Fish and Wildlife is aware of cormorants and will be continuing to monitor the problem, and we will be looking to hopefully find some additional solutions. The density of stock trout was the major factor in predicting cormorant predation. Also, the unfortunate timing of my study does leave some uncertainty about the extent of impacts during a normal year. However, returning to the normal schedule should reduce trout losses to lower than what was found during the study. And then lastly, even in a perfect scenario where cormorants had a total of 4 weeks to eat trout, the majority of trout were still available to anglers on opening day. And again, I want to thank you guys for listening, and I guess we'll start taking questions now.
I have a question for Mr. Sorry, I forgot your name. The person that was just talking, the biologist.
Yes, Justin Rosenblatt. Yeah.
Yes. First of all, I'd like to say I think I actually met you at Mill Pond.
Okay.
And I'd actually like to thank you for your inquisitive research on the cormorant predation, because as fishermen, I've always grown up and been told, you know, there's no trout left because of them. And it's nice to finally see someone in a state-funded academic way looking into it.
Yes, thank you. I really appreciate that.
Justin, Sean here, if I could jump in, I'm monitoring the chat and I see a question from Alex R. And it says, if there's a 70% stock trout survival rate due to cormorants, a pond such as Verona, stocked with 2,000 trout, would yield some 1,400 trout for the season. It means we'd be losing some 600 trout to the birds. Do you have a response to that?
Yes, and I will say that is potentially correct, and yes, that is a large number of trout. But again, I want you to remember that this occurred during the accelerated stocking schedule, where we had those high losses. However, I'll go back to the slide here. As we return back to a normal schedule, these losses will definitely be reduced. As you can see, we saw possibly a 29% or a 30% loss at the high end. Returning back to our schedule in 2022, at the high end, we're estimating that only about a 10% loss will occur at max. So since 2,000 trout will be stocked at Verona, seeing a 10% loss, we might only see about 200 trout. If I'm doing my math correct, we might only see about 200 fish lost.
And Justin, please correct me if I'm wrong, but during your study, the cormorants were stocked 4 weeks prior to opening day.
Yes.
As we return to normal, as we've done for the last 10 years or so, we always make a concerted effort to stock those cormorant waters as close to opening day as possible. So I think I think the comment there may be taken a little bit out of context, because certainly if we minimize the amount of time that the cormorants have to predate upon trout, if we reduce that from the 4 weeks during your study period down to just mere number of days within a week, I think you'd expect much less predation before the anglers have an opportunity to get in there.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, any other questions for Justin?
Yeah, Sean, I'd like to just add to that. This is Ross. You know, that in a normal year, non-accelerated schedule, we do stock our cormorant waters, the places that we know have the most cormorant predation, as close as physically possible to opening day. You know, that unfortunately, as more and more cormorant waters continue to increase, that's becoming more and more difficult to try to stock everything that final week. You know, just prior to preseason. But that's, I mean, that's a really important take there, is that you know, most of the water bodies that historically have cormorant problems are stocked all in that final week, just leading up to opening day. So in many cases, they only have a day or two of cormorant predation impacting opening day. So just wanted to mention that as well.
This is Jim Velchek. I didn't hear anything said about what other possible solutions there might be. I know a number of years ago there was talk about the possibility of finding cormorant nests and doing some egg scrambling, egg shaking, like is sometimes done with geese. I think the cormorants are a protected species, so we can't just go and shoot a bunch of them. And I don't think destroying eggs is the answer, because then they just lay more. But I know with geese, there's sometimes been making the eggs non-viable, and then they'll sit on them forever. I did surveying in the spring, opening day surveys for as far back as they were being done. And I know I always counted cormorants and watched them catch and devour many fish, sometimes more than the fishermen were catching. But what else can we do? Is there any options for other than just stocking close to opening day? Because the birds keep on eating even after opening day. What else can we do?
So that is definitely a very loaded question, and I appreciate that question. As you mentioned, they are protected underneath the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, and therefore they're governed by the federal government. So a lot of times we have issues dealing directly with managing cormorants, and therefore as an agency, state agency, we're mostly relegated to trying to work around them with things that we can control, such as with our trout stocking program. However, I did want to mention that just recently last year, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has started to relax a rule that allows for state agencies to start applying for depredation permits on cormorants. And however, there's a few caveats to that, where we need to start taking non-lethal measures before we can start taking lethal measures. But since it's so relatively new, we're still starting to look into that solution as well as other solutions.
Hello, Justin.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. This is Dave. I live in Atlantic County. Just if you're going in forward in the future with any studies you want to conduct on these birds, Birch Grove Park in Northfield, New Jersey is an ideal location. I fished this park for over 30 years, and there's like 3 or 4 that take residency every season there. And I mean, they clean up. It's amazing the amount of fish that these birds can eat. And I just wanted to let you know that, and just in case, like I say, if you're going to do a study in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that information.
Okay, do we have any more questions for Justin in regards to cormorants?
Yeah, we live in a small private lake in a 110-acre lake in northern New Jersey, and we're seeing a large population of cormorants personally, and eating a lot of fish here. We're self-funded, and so we stock trout, and we have other natural occurring species. Yeah, we're also trying to figure out how to deal with them. So.
Yeah, they're definitely a problem. They're a very persistent problem across the whole state, you know, whether or not these places are both publicly stocked or private stocked. They they have no discrimination against where they go.
Yeah, and so that comment that they're protected, I don't know if there's anything, has any studies been done to like deter them, like, you know, bird balls or, you know, fake alligator heads, anything like that?
I think back in Ed's presentation, you saw a lot of the measures that they take over the raceways, such as the big, you know, waving inflatable men and the propane cannons and
Right.
whatnot. There's a handful of different, you know, non-lethal measures that will spook them there. But again, it gets more difficult because that's in a hatchery setting where the fish are more confined, and therefore you have to you only have to protect, you know, a very confined area versus, you know, a large 110-acre lake. It gets to be a little bit more difficult to you know, do non-lethal measures to be able to spook them where they won't just.
Right. Yeah, they eat very good here. They do their digestive thing where their wings are open, and they eat well. Thank you.
Okay, that sounds good. At this point, what I'd like to do is that, you know, that's our final presentation. So at this point, I'd like to open it up to some general questions, and that'll be the way the meeting will go for the rest of its duration. I just wanted to thank all of our presenters. I think everybody did an excellent job. And let's open it up right here. At this point in time, I'd still ask that everyone in attendance keeps your microphone muted until you're ready to ask a question. But at this point in time, you can turn your cameras on if you'd like.
Is it possible, or what is possible to do when you see other anglers taking two or three more their limit one time? Can we do anything to report that?
Yes, Operation Game Thief, Warren DEP. Those numbers have been supplied in the chat. You can also find them in our digest. We do ask we ask as an angler, you don't take matters in your own hands. You never know who you're dealing with, so please don't interject. Don't get in somebody's face. You never know how they're going to react to that. So please, you know, contact Fish and Wildlife, and we'll do our best to get a conservation police officer out there on site. It's not worth putting yourself at risk.
Hey, Sean, with both of those numbers, does it matter what area you live in, north or south? Because there's an issue down south too, where people are, you know, catching more than they're supposed to have, or they're actually just doing destructive harm to the actual area that I would love to call on.
Yeah, you can just call it right into the you know, the Warren DEP line. There'll be a dispatcher that'll take care of it and find the most appropriate actions.
Thank you.
Hey, Sean, if I could add to that,
Sure,
for
yeah.
Operation Game Thief, if there's a chronic issue with an angler that you know has a tendency here, Operation Game Thief is anonymous or can be anonymous.
Excellent point.
Hey, Sean, a question for you. I know specifically the Hunterdon County area and probably many others suffered some significant changes to the stream beds. I know it was mentioned briefly from the flooding in the fall. So is there any thought about doing any kind of like pre-screening so you know what these areas look like and which ones are going to be perhaps not stocked in advance, or is that kind of like a real-time situation?
Sure. Well, I mean, as recently as last week, we had staff, both staff from our Bureau of Freshwater Fisheries and our Bureau of Lands Management, kind of going out, surveying some of these locations. They spent some hours on the road taking a look at it. Now, as always, don't forget that our on the stocking day, our drivers, use their discretion, and they're going to, look into a place when they go to throw fish. If that pool is lost or if silted in, they're certainly not going to throw fish there, but they'll do their best to accommodate, within reason, and get the fish in the general stretch. We do know that there have been, in particular, I know that we had staff out on some of the streams that flow into the Delaware River in western Hunterdon County. And although we got some reports of some potential difficulties for stocking, I can tell you that it really didn't seem as bad as was previously reported. So yeah, we're on top of it. We're doing our best to get out there preemptively. But if we can't get to all locations, it'll be in the hands of driver discretion. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, Sean, I'd like to add to that too, that that many of the areas currently under spring flows, we're going to be able to sneak some fish in. Some of those holes that anglers may remember, they certainly were impacted. There's a lot of rock and sediment that has moved. But as the river starts to respond to those storms, those holes again, they may change, they may go somewhere else, and our stocking program will try to adjust and evolve with what the river does. But as of now, I mean, myself personally, I was one of the staff that went and looked at streams like the Alexalkin and the Lockatong and a lot of those streams in Hunterdon County. And, we did feel that we can still get those fish in, but it will be a change for anglers, and you're just going to have to adjust and be patient.
Excuse me, Sean.
Sure.
Is my mic on?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry. Mill Pond in Park Ridge, New Jersey, the one that's being skipped this year, will fish still be stocked just below the dam in the river, or is that whole stretch condemned?
Yeah, I'm going to have to defer that question to one of our staff who's more familiar.
Now, I believe that, so as you know, we've been at Mill Pond before. So I believe that all of the fish that are going to be stocked at Mill Pond are going to be moved to other water bodies, as I believe that Mill Pond just won't be stopped at, but they'll be spread out to other water bodies such as like Donnerts and Indian Lake and like Pascat Creek and around. They'll stay in the general area. Otherwise, Ross, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I have a question if I could, as Sean. This regarding a few years ago, there were changes to stop stocking the upper parts of the South Branch to protect the wild trout population in there. And I'm just wondering if there's been any follow-up studies to see how successful the regulation changes were, and if there's any other waters that you're currently contemplating removing from stocking to protect wild fish populations.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Yeah, as you mentioned, we discontinued stocking the upper South Branch. And it was two parts. It was one to reduce the impact on the wild fish, but it was also due to a relatively lack of angling participation in that section. We have been following up on some of our waters in which we discontinued trout stocking on top of wild populations. We have a PhD who's been working with us for a number of years as an hourly, Luke Diglio. He's presented on some of this information in the past. And what he's doing is he's periodically going back to some of those waters. We have before and after data to look at some trends. And what we're trying to determine is, do we see either wild trout in general, or maybe brook trout more specifically, do we see them rebound once stocking is discontinued? And I could say, at this point, it's a pretty small sample size. We don't have any definite conclusions. And also, unfortunately, the last two seasons, due to the pandemic, the amount of field work that we did was greatly curtailed. That's something that, you know, we have our eyes on. I'm looking forward to getting back into that section in the Upper South Branch. Possibly as early as this summer, if not very likely next summer. And I'll be real excited to see those results and share them with our anglers. You had mentioned, I think the second part of your question may have referred to, do we have any other waters that we're looking to discontinue stocking on? And I think you framed that kind of in a positive manner to reduce stocking on top of wild populations. Staff can certainly jump in, you know, if I don't give a complete answer here, but I can definitely say that, you know, over the last 10 years or so, we've taken a hard look at many of our many of our trout producing streams, and we've taken a look at them both from a wild fish perspective, but also from a lack of angler utilization. So we've made a lot of steps over the last 10 years or so to discontinuing the stocking of some of those headwater streams that in part to reduce the impact on the wild fish. I don't have any particular waters in my mind right now that we're looking at to consider for like total discontinuation of stocking. But if any of our staff does, you know, staff, you guys can jump in now if you have anything you want to look at.
It keeps on doing that.
Okay. If not, let's move on to the next question.
Thank you for that answer.
Recording, if you wish not to be recorded, turn off your camera.
Hi,
The meeting.
you guys hear me?
Yep, we hear you.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for this opportunity. This has been a great presentation. I have a question about trout conservation areas and whether or not the state is looking into maybe expanding them or adding more conservation areas. I live in northern, northeast New Jersey, and for me, it takes me, an hour and a half to drive to a trout conservation area in February or March to fish. When I have places close by that are stocked in the fall and the spring, and that seem to probably be a good area to make trout conservation areas. I was just wondering how they go about, how you guys go about figuring out trout conservation areas and whether or not you're going to expand that.
So Matt, this is Ross. So basically, to try to answer your question the quickest, easiest way, we're always considering, what the anglers want. So it's meetings like this, it's comments like you just had that are very valuable to us. We're gonna, take note of these sort of things, and also in the future we try to get angler feedback from many different sources. I know in the past we've done telephone surveys, but we're also have performed internet surveys. Almost every single time we do have questions about this sort of thing to try to get an angler feedback, because just as many of the topics that you've seen in the chat, there's always a other side to the coin. So we try to get the best information from the anglers and then make the best decisions that we can. So as of right now, we don't have any definite plans of extending or adding new TCAs, but it's certainly open to suggestions. And if anglers want more TCAs, then definitely we would be considering that, as the TCAs are strictly user-based product.
And if I could add to that, Ross, and just for the benefit of all the anglers out there, we don't take regulation changes lightly. We know that there's significant impacts regardless of what side of the coin you're on. So we take great pride in doing significant surveys, temperature monitoring, electrofishing. We want to gather the data to make sure that any regulation change is going to be a biologically sound decision as well.
Sean, I have a question.
Sure. Hey,
Sean. Yeah, how you doing?
How you doing? Good.
All right. Thank you so much for what you've done and your entire staff. I have a quick question for you. Spooky Brook Pond, in Colonial Park. I know it's going to get the bonus fish. Ms. Dowling had talked about, you know, the 50. The lake was recently dredged, bare. Were there warm water fish stocked in that pond yet?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I'm pretty sure we had it on the list. That's something that unless other staff knows better than I do, I'll have to go back and look into our records to make sure that that's happened. But that's an excellent point. We know that, as you mentioned, the fish were salvaged and put into the nearby ponds within Colonial Park. But yeah, I will, unless Scott has a better
I can
idea.
chime in. This is Craig Lemon. I'm the Hackettstown Hatchery Superintendent. We did stock it a couple times last year. I know it was right after the big floods because our truck drivers had a tough time getting in there. But we did put largemouth bass and bluegill sunfish in there, definitely a couple times.
Okay, so that was after the dredging.
That was after the dredging and right after the Ida, I guess it was.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate it. You all do a great job.
Thanks a lot, Craig.
Thanks, Sean.
Sean, I have a question. It's regards to access. I know New Jersey, a very densely populated state, and many lakes. I'll give an example. Way under is a state park, and I brought this up the Park and Recs department. But a lot of times they close in the summer when you get a lot of visitors that go to the beach area. And then even though you're clearly be fishing with either a canoe or and fishing gear and a license and stamp, you're turned away. Is there any, discussions that go on between the groups as to whether fishermen can be given access where they're clearly not using the beach area? I mean, you have thousands of acres and you're turned away because the beach area has been closed. I understand there's safety issues, but I really wonder if fishermen can be given any kind of preference for those stocked waters or other waters for freshwater fishing.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And if I may, if Assistant Commissioner Golden is still on the call, Dave, would you like to address that?
I can attempt to. We're working with parks in a couple different areas to try to shore up angler access in certain situations when the areas are closed. So to give anglers access, even though the area is closed for other uses. So we can discuss that with them, put it on the list. I can say that I haven't had any discussions with them regarding that particular spot.
I appreciate that response. I think it's an important one. I've discussed it with many people from parks, and when you're right there being blocked off from going in and clearly showing, but I would like to understand more of the reason of that, safety. If getting that access just because the beach area gets closed, if there's any way when you're clearly going to just fish or go on the water where no one really is, but many people there. I think you understand the question, but I greatly appreciate bringing that up with the other groups to possibly allow that access, and appreciate everything that you do. Thank you.
I'm sorry, was this a PACON? Was this question regarding a PACON?
No, it happened to me in way under lake.
Okay, that's what I thought. I wanted to make sure that I didn't mishear you, but I didn't think you were speaking of PACON. Yeah, okay. We'll put that on the list to discuss with them.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and if I could add to that, during the last 2 years, during the global pandemic, we saw a resurgence of people kind of rediscovering the outdoors. State, county, and municipal parks certainly did get flooded with more people as things as shopping malls and other indoor forms of activities were limited or closed, and restaurants being closed and everything. So many places saw an exorbitant number of vehicular traffic and foot traffic. So there were, across all levels from state to county to municipal, there were places being forced to close to access. So as some places become, over capacity, they were shut down. And I'm just answering this question kind of generally. And even, in recent years, last year, a few of our own wildlife management areas, were closed for similar reasons.
Yeah, Sean, I don't think that was, and I appreciate that, but the point I'm making was even prior to pandemic. I agree with what you just stated, but we just live in a crowded state, and that's a problem every year with the state parks. And I realize there's just so much beach area, and it's a complex issue. But I just wish fishermen that invest and are clearly going there to use the resource would be given a little bit of leeway instead of just being blocked out because there's so many people on a beach. And I think that's an ongoing issue, not specifically pandemic related, just the population. And I think it's be a common issue that would go on in many of the state parks.
When we've discussed this with parks in the past, specifically regarding beaches and fishing on their state park, not on the beach front, the ocean front, one of the concerns that is raised by parks has to do with hooks left on the beach. So anglers that are picking up after themselves and leave hooks. That's one of the concerns when they have bathing beaches and fishing. So I'm not saying that's what it is way beyond it, but that's what we've heard in the past. And I'm not sure how much that issue is even really true or just perceived, but just to respond to you in terms of why they might do that.
Okay.
Hey, Sean, I'd like to address the comment on Powhatan Lake and the fall stocking that came up earlier. I'm not sure if the gentleman is still, in the call. I hope so. So yes, there was some confusion, and we apologize, for the confusion and not having the answer ready. But I was able to look up, what went on there, and the confusion lies in the fact that during 2020, when the pandemic hit, we had a few thousand extra fish from the spring that were not put out at that time. So what we did is we added 4 water bodies for fall stocking, and Powhatan Lake was one of those 4. So that's why in 2020 Powhatan Lake was stocked in the fall. But prior to that, it was not part of our fall program, and it was only a one-time situation. So the website, as the angler mentioned, said that it was stocked again in 2021, and that was incorrect. I believe the website, we got confused. I think a little miscommunication between Powhatan Creek and Powhatan Lake. Powhatan Creek is part of the fall program, where Powhatan Lake was only a part in that 2020. But seeing the interest that certainly Powhatan Lake generates from a spring program, and also it seems like some interest to keep it as a fall or to move it to a fall program. That's something that I guess we can look into. But as I don't want to go down this road as we started to, I think, at the Hackettstown Forum 2 weeks ago. We're limited to how many fish that we have, especially for the fall program. So, we have to keep in mind that if we add a water body to the fall program, like I mentioned, Sonic River at the Hackettstown Forum, or in this case, Powhatan Lake, that those fish have to come from somewhere. We appreciate the call and concern. I hope I cleared that up. If you have any further questions, you can feel free to call our office, and we can talk on a one-on-one on that. Thank you.
Would it be okay to ask a question?
Yes, I can see your mouth moving, but it looks like you're muted.
So I just wanted to ask about, I remember when I was fishing, someone was telling me about the algal bloom. I think it was in Lake Hopatcong, if I remember correctly. It was quite a bit of time back. I mean, it could have been a year ago or so. I just wanted to know what was the state on that.
Yes, specifically, you're asking about Lake Hopatcong specifically?
I believe it was Lake Opakon. I could be getting confused with a nearby lake, but that's what I recall. Yeah.
Yeah, so in recent years, you know, the Department of Environmental Protection has been monitoring closely these harmful algal blooms. There's a great resource. There's a link from Fish and Wildlife's website where the monitoring, and it's also in our digest annually, where the specific monitoring is posted. So anglers will have an idea of where these harmful algal blooms occur. We can say that they're very intermittent. Some days they're there, some days are not. So paying close attention to where they are, and then the potential implications for how it may impact you as an angler. We try to keep that information, you know, very up to date in real time for you. As of right now, the last time I checked that website, it was not updated. And I see here that Ross, thanks a lot, Ross. He posted us the website for HABs there in the chat. You guys can all take a look. The last time I looked at it, which was a week or two ago, it had not been updated yet. I'm not sure of its status right now.
Hey, Sean.
Yeah, Sean, let me, before we move on, I actually spoke with biological monitoring about that, and currently there are no active HABs. So the website, although it looks like it's not updated, that's the reason why, is that they have no active HABs, which which is more typical to be a warmer water temperature problem in most cases. So that's not atypical to have no ongoing HABs right now. The division's policy, or Fish and Wildlife's policy, is that if there's an ongoing HAB, that we will not stock trout in a water body that has that. That has caused some issues for our fall stocking in the past. In a lot of cases, or in those cases that we've done in the fall, is what we've done is we've moved those water bodies to our winter stocking as long as the HAB clears up before then. And biological monitoring, Division of Biological Monitoring, they have gone out and performed assessment of the water to make sure that HAB is cleared up before stocking.
And then the other half, Ross, if I could just add to that, the other half of our stocking programs in regarding the warm and cool water species, those stockings have continued. One place in particular, Spruce Run Reservoir, is one of the places that has the most active HABs year in and year out. And we get the question all the time that if there's HABs there, why are you continuing to stock it? And the big difference here between trout and the warm and cool water fish is that we're stocking, for example, northern pike and Spruce Run, we're stocking them as fingerlings. So, those fish are put in there as a put, grow, and take fishery, not for that instant catch. So those fingerling pike, are not intended to be caught automatically. They're intended to grow and be caught, for years to come. So I just wanted to clarify that, when it comes to the fish reared out of the Hackettstown facility, we do actively stock water bodies regardless of HAB status.
Hey,
Okay.
Sean?
Sure.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we hear you.
All right, listen, Sean, you got the trout, you have 6 trout for till May 31st. Okay, after May 31st, it drops down to 4 trout. The mortality rate on the trout after May 31st is great between the cormorants and the warm water. Why don't you have 6 trout all year long into the fall? It doesn't make any sense to drop down at 30 to on the 31st when you know the trout are going to die anyway, and how many actually live after that? Is there a reasoning why couldn't you do that for 6 trout all year long?
Yeah, I can answer
Yeah,
that.
I'm on the phone.
That's definitely an excellent question. If I could remind everyone else to mute your microphones, that would be great. The simplest answer to that is we do have more waters than you think, primarily some of the larger rivers in the north that do hold trout year round. Rivers like the Musconetcong and Powhatan, the South Branch and the North Branches of the Raritan, the Pequest, the Flatbrook, just to name a few. They do hold fish, they do hold trout year round. So, although, possibly some of the locations that you fish might be kind of non-trout waters where you can expect mortality, we are on the side of consistency among those regulations as to not confuse the anglers. Those warmer waters that do not support trout year round, we do taper off the stocking, and many of them are not stocked into May because we wouldn't want to be stocking those trout leading right up to increased temperature timeframes that you might see once the summertime hits.
Well, the other question here is now, if you, I agree with what you're saying there, but I fish the South Branch strictly. With you taking all the dams down, okay, the water is going to drop a lot more than it was in years before because of the dams taken down. The water is going to get warmer at that point. And if you have a drought during, say, this summer for, say, just a month or so, the waters in the South Branch are going to get so low, them trout aren't going to survive in there.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's something that we're going to monitor. We're going to monitor temperature changes over time. And in many cases, when you remove a dam, the water flow is restored and there's less solar impact in many cases. So, I don't want to get out ahead and make a prediction as to whether the water temperature is going to increase or decrease. Or whether there's going to be enough flow, because in many cases you're going to actually get more flow, possibly more aeration. So rest assured that that's something we'll keep an eye on, and we will adjust our program accordingly.
All right, thanks for
Thank you. That's a great question. Great point.
Hi, this is Joe. I have a
Was that
question
in regards to the
about,
Lake Solitude Dam or?
about stocking locations.
Yeah. I think the question was geared more towards some of the dam removals on the lower end of the Raritan system.
Okay,
I
sorry.
don't see Lake Solitude coming out at any point in the foreseeable future.
Okay, sorry to interrupt.
I had a question about determining the stocking locations as an exploring fisherman in the new waterways that I'm going to for the first time. How would I know which areas were stocked precisely, like by the signage on the tree, or how would you know where they're putting the stock?
Yeah, so there's a number of ways that you can determine that. First and foremost, if you look into the Fish and Wildlife Digest, you'll see sections of rivers clearly delineated with an upper boundary and a lower boundary. Now, that doesn't mean we're stocking fish at predetermined intervals. The stocking locations are often determined by accessibility, both by anglers and by the stocking trucks. So in many cases, if you see a trout stock water sign, we either stock fish directly at that location or at locations very, very close to it. So whether you're looking in the digest for a broad scale of the trout stock locations, or if you're looking specifically at trees, there are two different measures. We also, on our website, do have recommended trout fishing access points. It's not going to give you every single stocking point, as we don't release that specific stocking points to the public, but it does catalog the great majority of stocking points, and especially those where parking is available and things of that nature. We're also working on a web application that's going to be a map, an interactive map that'll enable anglers to click on there. But once again, you're not going to see specific stocking points. You have to work a little bit to find those fish. But yeah, I hope that answers your question thoroughly enough.
Hey, Sean, I have a question. I know it's been a hot topic in the chat, and we kind of briefly touched on it with the preseason catch and release. So is it fair to say that the decision has already been made this year that there will be no catch and release in the early season, similar to last year?
Yes, yes, there will be no catch and release in the early portion of the season this year.
And I know you mentioned briefly the thought of a survey to kind of gauge interest. I'll give you a personal story. I've been fishing the Western Jersey area for 35, 40 years. The early season allowed me to actually bring my son for the first time, and we had a great afternoon. We were able to catch quite a few fish, and I'm hoping that the kid is now hooked. And I think that was purely a function of being able to go out and not have to fight with people fishing in a popular pool where it's just more challenging. This was just dad and son time. I think that was a big thing that shouldn't be overlooked in terms of trying to get more of the youth today into fishing as a sport, which I think is one of the problems we're having with just too many other opportunities for sports and you name it, internet. Getting kids out in the wild with their parents is a big thing that the state should consider. And I'd like to see some kind of either survey or consideration be made for future years, because I think it was really successful last year.
Yeah, well, I'm really grateful you shared your story. There's definitely a lot of pros and cons to many of the decisions that we make. I too saw an advantage in many capacities of having a lot of fish available, prior to opening day or after opening day. But once again, let's get back into normalcy. Let's stay committed to a formal angler survey, so we can shape the program into a way that works for as many people as possible. I do want to clarify one earlier statement that I just made in regards to the catch and release for this year. Like, just to be perfectly clear, we are not planning an early season catch and release right now. But however, I just have to throw out there that if the pandemic were to take an ugly turn, if things were to ramp up very rapidly, we are prepared for to have a contingency plan that if we have to get rid of the fish in an accelerated way, we would. Like I said, I'm enthusiastic and positive and happy that the direction that we've been moving. But I guess when it comes to what's around the corner and not having a crystal ball, not knowing if there'll be a new variant, things could change on a dime, as we all know, things we've experienced the last 2 years. So the best thing I can say is stay tuned to our website. Keep an eye on there. We're going to keep the most up-to-date information. And if in doubt, go to the back of the digest and find one of the phone numbers for one of our regional offices and give us a call, and we'll do our best to answer those questions.
Hi, Sean. Can you hear me?
Sure can.
All right, excellent. So this is Christopher and Anthony Mena. I don't know if you remember us. You did a talk for Jersey Shore Aquarium Society a while ago. Thanks.
I do.
Yeah, good. Hope you guys can come out eventually. My question is this. So I totally understand the whole catch and release thing for early anglers. Did you ever consider the possibility of like maybe potentially having those people come out, like have restrictions as far as what gear they can use, specifically, use barbless hooks and, stuff to, because that was the big thing I noticed last year is that, a lot of people are just uneducated in how to catch and release fish properly. So, if you maybe, for the first 2 weeks or 3 weeks, whatever, have it to where, they're using barbless hooks and, doing that. I think that would be better than, just having people, with dough balls and treble hooks, killing the trout as soon as they get them. That was just something I observed when we were out during catch and release last year. I just want to hear your opinion of it.
Yeah, no, thank you. And that's a topic we discussed thoroughly, kind of over the last 2 years. Let's just keep in mind that this was essentially the accelerated stocking season that occurred in spring of 2020. That was an emergency situation. We had, if you remember, the pandemic really started to take off I believe in March of 2020, and that's right where we're at now. That's right where we're ramping up for the season. So yeah, there were things that we were not able to do that if we had more time we may have changed. One of which may have been kind of changing the regulations to make it a little bit more catch and release friendly. So that was one of the things that, it's an excellent point. It's something, being highly considered. If we were, I could say that all things are on the table. So if in the future we do have like a statewide catch and release period, I would anticipate a lot of discussion revolving around the potential to possibly go barbless, possibly go single hook, possibly go artificial lure only. But we certainly don't want to make any commitments or bold statements at this point. Great question. Ross, let me go over to you and just give you an opportunity if you think there's anything. I know you've been monitoring the chat closely. Are there any pressing issues that we haven't adequately addressed yet?
Well, Sean, I had a whole list here, but it seems like most of the people that had questions in the chat also had an opportunity to speak them. One of the questions that I do have still on the list I didn't cross off was a question about golden rainbows and the ability for our hatchery to stock them. Not sure if Ed wants to address, or if you want to address that. I think in the past it has come up, and it is something that we're considering, but I do know that it can cause some difficulties for the hatchery.
Yeah, I think we could share this this answer. Ed, if I may go first, and then I'll address the question kind of from a I don't know, we'll say from an optimistic or try something new kind of way. But then, Ed's real good about bringing me back to reality and talking about limitations. So from an angler standpoint, I can certainly see the interest in a new diverse fishing opportunity, especially since we've only been raising the rainbows at this point in time. I can definitely see the interest. I also fish in Pennsylvania quite a bit, and I see how intriguing, the Goldens or the Palominos are. I think part of our job at Fish and Wildlife is to provide, new and diverse opportunities for our sportsmen. But with that said, everything has a cost, and everything, there's typically some concern there. Because not everything, not everything lines up perfectly in an idealistic way. So Ed, if I could hand that over to you.
Well, basically in a hatchery situation, when I did my presentation there, you guys saw all the predatory deterrent stuff there. Raising golden rainbows was kind of like ringing the dinner bell for the fish, for the birds there. Basically, those birds can see those, golden fish in the raceways. They stick out pretty brightly there. So, we're still looking at the solar project and covering. So, it's probably not the ideal situation to put golden trout into the raceways there that are going to bring in more birds when we're, concerned with bringing in disease.
Thanks, Ed. Okay, we're here approaching 12:30. We'll give it a last call for questions. So maybe we'll take two more. If you have a real pressing question, I just want to say at this point, thank you for all your participation. We take great pride at Fish and Wildlife of trying to provide the best customer service we can. So if there are any questions that do not get answered, feel free to contact us. One thing that I didn't mention, but I meant to during my presentation, is if you go onto our website, within the freshwater fishing page, Bureau of Freshwater Fisheries, you're going to find a tab that says Biologist Contacts. So if you have any questions, you'll be able to find that same map that I had the presentation for. And if you hover over their names, you're going to see an email address for each of our regional biologists. I think that's a great starting question, especially when you have questions that are unique to a particular water body or a particular area. So with that said, let's take two more questions before we wrap it up. I see there's someone with the initials of AN.
Yes, Sean.
Yes.
Andy Nero here. How are you?
Good. How are you?
First off, I would say I have the greatest amount of respect for the Division of Fish and Game. I'm a 73-year-old trout fisherman, been fishing since I was a little boy, and you have provided me and my family with many, many, many happy hours of fishing. my main question or point, are you sufficiently providing the stocking drivers with where they're supposed to stock? We had a little problem with the winter stocking at Lake Aquatonk in Sussex County and Mount Hope Pond. The driver was new and he stocked all the fish in one place instead of putting them in two places. So what happened was the fishermen that line up in one stocking area and then the other stocking area all converged together. And it was like a real, freak scene. So are the drivers familiar with where they're supposed to put the trout? That's what happened. And secondly, concerning catch and release, bad idea. Catch and release should only be done by experienced fishermen that know how to release a trout. I have several people that I fish with regularly that I've met on the pond. They don't want fish, they don't want to take fish home, which is fine. And they say, "Oh, do you want them, Andy?" I said, "No, I'll catch my own fish." And there they are, yanking the hook. Fish is bleeding, throw it in the water, and there it is floating. So I have to go over and educate them and try to get them to stop doing that. So catch and release on a full-time authorized basis is not a good idea. Not a good idea. You want to see fish killed? I don't like to see that at all. But again, thank you for your presentations and give the drivers an update on whereabouts on the lake. Of course, the fish all got in where they go, but the thing was, men were set up on both ends of the lake. Lake Aquatonk is like a horseshoe, and people set up in the two stocking areas where they know the truck goes, and all the fish went in one area. So everybody ran together, and they were all climbing all over each other. So that's about it. Thank you again.
Gotcha. Yeah, thank you for your question and your comment. Both are appreciated. I can say that our drivers are provided with adequate instructions. So yeah, you may have a new driver that might do things a little bit differently. Yeah, that sounds like a situation that may have been a little bit unfortunate, but I mean, I've been to Aquatonk before. It's not our largest pond. So I would have to think that those fish, even if not stocked ideally, I'd have to think that those fish, spread out pretty quickly.
Yeah, sure. But not on opening day, they just stay in one little hole there. They just stayed where they were stocked, and that was it all day. So no big harm done, but it's a point to look at. That's all.
Got it. Okay, we have time for one more question.
Hey, Sean, hello, Sean. Can you hear me?
Sure can.
I got a question. I live in Hamilton Township, Mercer County, and I was wondering why Grops Lake doesn't get stocked. I don't know if there's any particular reason. A lot of people fish Grops Lake, and it sure would be nice if they included that in the stocking areas.
Yeah, we'll take a look at it. We'll take a look at it. In many cases, our trout stocking program has a history that started many years ago. We tend to continue those places that are stocked unless there's a particular problem. Yeah, thanks for bringing Grops Lake to our attention for consideration. I can tell you that I'll have staff look into it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I'd like to conclude the meeting, by first off thanking, all the anglers for participating. I thought we had some lively discussion. Looking here, somebody may have had a higher number than I see, but at one point in time, I saw up to 210 people. If anybody saw a higher number than that, please speak now. But yeah, I consider that just that high number of participation in and of itself to be very successful. So I appreciate all that feedback and participation from the anglers. I also want to thank all the division staff, for being here, sticking with it for a long meeting. I think everybody was very helpful in both monitoring the chat and answering questions. I thought we had excellent presentations today. So with that, I'd like to wrap it up and just remind everybody that these presentations will be found on our website. The meeting was recorded, and we should have that up there posted, I would think, by early next week. Once again, thank everybody greatly, and looking out the window, looks like I have at least 3 inches of snow where I'm at. So travel safely and have a great weekend. Thank you.